Have you ever noticed how some people don't need to speak, move, or even try, yet their very presence shifts the entire atmosphere of a room? They don't announce themselves, they don't seek attention. Even when they quietly withdraw somehow, they remain the center. Why? Because what they carry isn't noise, but energy. And now ask yourself, what if you did the same? What if you stopped reacting instantly to everything? What if you chose silence not as an escape, but as a strategy, as a conscious, powerful stand? What would happen? This is where the real issue starts. The moment when people try to understand you is when you are no longer accessible. Because as you withdraw, their control mechanisms break down. People are used to manipulating you by your reactions, by your predictable behavior. But one day, when you end these habits, everything they thought they knew about you collapses. As Carl Jung said, everything that bothers us in others actually points to something in ourselves that we are not aware of. The truth is that for years you have worked hard to be available. You have answered every urgent message, tried to diffuse every tension, offered an explanation in every silence. But what are you left with at the end of the day? Tiredness, exhaustion, and an inner emptiness that you cannot make sense of. Because you have always given your energy to others, to those who don't deserve it, to those who don't reciprocate, to those who just consume and withdraw. This narrative does not suggest that you sulk against the world. It suggests that you return to yourself. The process Jung called individuation starts right here, not being ashamed of withdrawing. Silence is not escape, but awareness. Not reacting is not indifference, but strength. When someone tries to provoke you, when you remain silent, they feel uncomfortable, because your silence echoes the emptiness inside them. For years you have been taught to be always available, to respond quickly, to meet everyone's emotional needs, to compromise yourself. But maybe nobody told you that being so accessible is a kind of bondage. Because the person who is always available is the one who is most easily forgotten. Someone who is accessible to everyone, who is used like a need button, creates habit, not respect. And every time you say yes, you are actually saying no to yourself once again. So why do we react so much? Why do we feel the need to fix, explain, please everything? This is where Jung's concept of psychic energy comes into play. Our mental energy is not unlimited. Every thought, every emotion, every behavior takes a piece of us. And if we don't choose with whom, what, and when we spend this energy, the world decides for us. Let's ask an important question at this point. Are you managing your energy, or is your environment draining your energy? The answer to this question explains the cause of burnout in your life. Because every event you react to, every conflict you are dragged into without thinking, every dialogue with a person who is not worthy, takes something from you. And over time, all that is left of you is a tired shell. According to Carl Jung, true transformation begins by directing this energy inward. It is important to observe, not react. You cannot be liberated without recognizing your emotions, without recognizing your triggers. Manipulative people do not exert pressure to control you. They don't need to speak loudly. They don't need to make clear demands. They only see the places you leave open and push the buttons. They know what makes you tick. When you always respond, when you give a response to every provocation, you give these people the opportunity to control. And the sad thing is that most of the time, these responses are not your own. They are programmed. Remember Carl Jung's concept of projection. People project onto others what they repress in their inner world. But very few people realize the passive side of this projection, that is, these images projected on you. The more emotionally available you are, the more projection you carry. Those who relate to you become attached to the role you play, not you. The friend who calls you in a crisis is not there because they really care about you, but because you fulfill their needs. So why do you accept these roles? Because the fear of rejection forces you to, because part of you still wants to be loved and approved with a hunger from the past. And this is where the most powerful manipulation is born. In the guilt, when you feel indebted even to someone who has harmed you, when you think it is a responsibility to be available. But the game ends when you stop reacting, when you say no, when you remain silent, when you retreat instead of explaining yourself. Something starts to crack. The masks that people have put on you fall off, the roles are reversed. They don't know what to do with you anymore because you are not acting in your old patterns. And this makes them uneasy, because now they have to look not at you, but at their own inner emptiness. Being unreachable leaves them alone with truths that others don't want to face. Your silence magnifies the noise inside them, and this is why their first reaction to you is often anger. Because you are no longer responding to their needs, you are acting from your own center. As Jung said, enlightenment begins not with the light that is imagined, but with the darkness that becomes conscious. When you withdraw, you don't just become invisible, your being becomes a different force. When you don't react, an inner clarity develops. When you take a step back emotionally, the cycles of manipulation collapse. And every retreat is you starting to build your identity from your own essence, not from the perception of others. But this is not easy. Silence comes at a price. People who love you only for your function move away. Those who don't want to understand you say you are cold, distant, or arrogant. But this reaction is the result of your change, not theirs. You refuse to mold yourself for their benefit anymore. As you mature, your words become fewer. Because now you know that every word is energy. Silence is no longer withdrawal. It is inner mastery. It is the freedom of one who is freed from the obligation to express oneself. And others cannot cope with this freedom. When you withdraw from everything, silence is the first thing that comes. At first it is suffocating, as if an emptiness resonates inside you. There are voices questioning, am I doing the right thing? Have I gone too far? Have I lost the people who really love me? But this silence transforms over time. An internal cleansing begins. When the voices inside you are silenced, when you are purified from the chaos of the outside, a pure awareness remains. This awareness gives you the opportunity to hear who you are for the first time. This is exactly what Jung called the process of individuation, the courage to find your true self, free from the expectations of others about who you should be. Then comes loneliness. But this is a loneliness that comes not from lack, but from completion. No longer lost in the crowd, you have learned to be whole within yourself. You open your heart only to what is in harmony with peace. You will be lonely, yes. But this loneliness is no longer a lack. It is a privilege, because you have chosen yourself. And this choice transforms you. Who you are is no longer determined by how you look in the eyes of others, but by how faithful you are to your inner voice. At some point you realize, the people who tell you you have changed are actually doing so because they can no longer use you, because to them you should have always been available, always understanding, always accessible. But now you are only open to what serves your inner peace. When you don't need to prove anything to anybody, people don't know what to do. And this confusion drives them away from you, but it liberates you because you have finally taken your own side. You will be misunderstood in this process. Arrogant, they will say. Cold, they will say. But now you know every sentence, every response, every explanation becomes an investment of energy. And not everyone deserves access to your truth. Silence is no longer a lack, but a choice. Even your absence carries a message. The discomfort they feel when you are not there is not out of love for you, but out of a loss of control over you. And then something is reborn in that deep, silent space. Your wholeness. You are no longer just someone who refuses to exist in crowds, but someone who is at peace with herself and complete with herself. As Jung said, light is not found by imagining it, but by making the darkness conscious. You no longer look for this light outside, but within yourself, and you find it, first through loss, then through loneliness, and finally through freedom. This is where rebirth begins. What defines you is no longer others' perception of you, but your loyalty to yourself. You lose people, but you win yourself. There are those who don't understand you, but for the first time you really hear yourself. This is not an easy path, but nothing that is real is easy. And now I want to ask you this question. Are you willing to be misunderstood, even unloved, for the sake of your own inner freedom? If you can honestly answer yes to this question, it means that you have already crossed the threshold of transformation. If this video touched you, if it moved you, leave this sentence in the comments. I choose my peace. Let's see how many people are now ready for this transition. And remember, the next step will be even more important. See you there.